My friend Lela lives in Boston, and my friend Helen lives in Shawano. Between us, we have 8 cats. While I was working on our virtual Christmas program, and after the closed closet volunteers insisted I should have this jacket, Lela decided that her older cat, a black cat with green eyes named Lafitte, should have had a part in the Christmas program. That didn't happen, but I promised him a story for after Christmas. So here we have The Cats at the Manger by yours truly. Once upon a time, a long time ago in fact, there lived a group of kittens. Well, really, they were all grown cats, but still they liked to think of themselves as kittens, young and adventurous. There were 8 kittens. 2 were tiger-striped, 3 were black, 2 were gray, and 1 was orange and white and very fluffy. They lived in a barn next to an inn on the edge of a little bitty town called Bethlehem. When you looked at the inn, you wouldn't have seen anything very impressive, and compared to the other inns in town, it was very, very small. But it was a nice inn, run by a friendly and outgoing innkeeper, his wife, their 2 sons, and 2 daughters. The inn had 7 bedrooms, a dining room with a big fireplace where people could gather, drink tea, and talk, a cozy kitchen, which the kittens were definitely not allowed to visit, and a yard. In the yard stood the barn, where the kittens lived. Sometimes people who stayed at the inn brought animals with them: donkeys, camels, sheep, goats, and sometimes even dogs. When the people were staying at the inn, their animals would stay in the barn with the kittens. The kittens did their very best to welcome the other animals and make them comfortable, even the dogs. The older of the striped kittens was in charge of security, making sure that every animal who came to visit the barn knew where they were supposed to sleep, when they should take their turn at the water dish, and where they should have their dinner. The other kittens mostly did what kittens do. They napped in sunbeams, jumped up onto the rafters, chased each other, tunneled in the straw piles, ate the meals kindly provided by the innkeeper's wife, and took more naps. One of the black kittens, though, who had beautiful green eyes and thought he was about 13 years old, took the job of hospitality very seriously. He had been rescued by the innkeeper many years earlier, when he was in fact a very, very tiny kitten. For several months he had lived inside, in a basket by the fireplace, patiently being fed and brushed by the innkeeper several times a day, until he grew bigger and stronger and was able to go out to the barn and join the other kittens. Because he had been so tiny and alone in the world, he wanted to make sure no one else, no creature, not even a dog, felt lonely and left out. So whenever a new animal came to stay in the barn, he would amble over to them, his tail held high, purring and mewing to make sure they knew they were welcome. One day, the kittens were all sitting around after breakfast, grooming themselves, as kittens do, and discussing the fact that there seemed to be a lot of people in their town. They had heard from some doves who came to the barn that every inn was full, and surely their own tiny but happy inn was full to bursting. There were people everywhere, coming and going, all seeming to have some purpose down at the center of town. The kittens weren't too worried. There were a few other animals who had come to stay in the barn: a nice big sheep with a fluffy coat who let the kittens jump on top and ride around, a big brown and white cow, and a scraggly black and white dog who, despite being a dog, was in fact quite nice. The older striped kitten, who was in charge of barn security, mentioned that there seemed to be a very big star right over the barn. all the kittens went outside, sat themselves down in a line, and stared up at the sky. Sure enough, there was a star right over the barn, a star bigger than they had ever seen before. The older striped kitten declared it was a sign, which meant that surely something exciting was going to happen. Most of the kittens were sure that it meant extra snacks, because even a little bit of cheese that one of the innkeeper's daughters would sneak to them after dinner, because that was just about the most exciting thing they could think of. But the black kitten with the big green eyes took extra care in grooming himself, wanting to make sure he looked his very best, because he wondered if just maybe instead of some thing exciting, it would be some one exciting that he would need to welcome. A little while later, we don't know how long exactly because kittens aren't very good at telling time unless it's dinner time. The kittens were lying about at the front of the barn when they saw a pretty gray donkey go by. The donkey looked tired, but determined to make sure that the man walking next to him and the woman on his back got wherever they were going safely. When the donkey and his people got to the door of the inn, the woman on his back got off, and the kittens could see that she was pregnant. The man knocked on the door to the inn. The kittens knew that he must be asking if there was a room, but they also knew that there were no rooms at all. Not even a tiny closet was free. But they also knew that their innkeeper was a good and kind man who wouldn't turn anyone away unless he absolutely, completely, entirely had to. The kittens sat and watched. The innkeeper scratched his head and waved his hands. The man with the donkey pointed at his wife at her very pregnant belly and started to cry. The innkeeper waved his hands again, and then his wife appeared at the door. She took one look at the man and the very pregnant woman and their tired but faithful donkey and sprang into action. She said some things and waved towards the barn. The man clearly didn't like her solution, but the very pregnant woman calmly touched his arm, smiled at him, and then it was all decided. The man picked up the donkey's reins, and they all turned towards the barn. The older striped cat started getting the other animals in order, moving the sheep in with the cow on the east side of the barn, and having the dog push the hay trough over to the west side. The kittens all sat very patiently, well, as patiently as kittens can sit, and watched as the innkeeper's wife came in with the man and the woman and their donkey. She led the donkey over to where the cow and sheep were, and the donkey sank down into the fresh straw they had put down. The woman and the man set down their bags and looked around, tired and scared, but happy to be somewhere that had a roof at last. Then it was time for the black kitten with the green eyes to do his thing. He passed one paw over his ears just to make sure they looked their best, and ambled over to the man and woman. The man started to push him away, but he knew he needed to be there, so he persisted, purring as hard as he could and fluffing up his tail so they would know he was friendly. The woman reached out her hand and scratched his ears, and the black kitten with the green eyes rubbed up against her belly. Then, much to his surprise, the black kitten with the green eyes felt the woman's belly move. It gave a big shudder and a rumble and then another shudder. The black kitten with the green eyes didn't want to be in the way, so he leapt up to the hay to watch. Now, the kittens all knew what giving birth meant. They had seen it happen with kittens and dogs and cows and sheep and donkeys and camels, but they had never seen it with a human before. They watched, their eyes wide with amazement, because they were pretty sure that humans didn't usually give birth in barns. But sure enough, after a little while, the woman gave birth, right there on the straw. The man handed the woman some fabric, and she wrapped the baby nice and snug. Then she looked around the barn, wondering where she could put the baby down for a nap. The black kitten with the green eyes meowed very softly and stood on the edge of the hay trough. The woman smiled and laid the baby in the trough, the hay making a nice soft bed for him. Then the woman reached out and patted the black kitten with the green eyes and smiled. The black kitten with the green eyes looked at the woman and at the baby and realized there was just enough room for him at the end of the trough next to the baby's feet. He settled in, purring, and snuggled around the baby to keep him warm. The other kittens, meanwhile, were looking at the door of the barn because while all of this had been happening, the star over the barn had gotten brighter and brighter and brighter. And people had come to the barn, shepherds who looked like they'd walked right out of the fields. They came and looked at the woman and the man, and then at the baby sleeping in the hay trough with the black kitten with the green eyes curled up at his feet. The shepherds talked to the man and the woman. They said they had been in the fields taking care of their sheep when the angels appeared to him. The angels told them that they would find a baby sleeping in a barn, and that the baby would be someone amazing. The baby, the angels said, would bring the entire world peace and hope, and would help people to know God in new ways. That the baby would be called Emmanuel, and would remind the whole world that God is always with them. The man and the woman smiled, thanking them for their words and for sharing the angel's message. And through it all, the black kitten with the green eyes slept and purred and kept the very special baby happy and warm. The end.